You found it at the back of a cupboard, or maybe out in the garage, covered in orange rust. It might be a pan you bought years ago, or one that belonged to your mother or your grandmother. You ran your thumb across the rough, rusty surface and quietly decided that it was finally done. Maybe you already scrubbed at it with soap and steel wool, and only made the bare metal look worse. Or you left it to soak in the sink overnight, and by morning the rust had spread even further. So it sits there, this heavy old pan, while you reach for the non-stick one you replace every couple of years. You have half a mind to just throw the rusty old thing away and finally be done with it for good. But long before anyone ever sold a non-stick pan with a coating that peels and wears thin, people cooked on the very same piece of iron for their entire lives and then handed it down. No special coating, no restoration kit, no replacing it every few years when it wears out. Just an understanding of what rust really is, and one simple, cheap way to bring the pan back. In the next few minutes, I'll show you exactly why that pan is not actually ruined at all, why the rust is only skin deep, and the forgotten way to bring a cast iron pan back to life. And no, you are not going to scrub away the seasoning that makes the pan worth keeping. We are going to do this in two parts, and the order of them matters more than you might think. First, we take the rusty, tired pan you have right now and bring the bare iron back to clean life. Then, we build the seasoning up again and set a habit so the rust never gets a foothold. Because the second part, the part that almost everyone skips, is the part that decides whether the pan stays good for 1 week or cooks for you for the next 50 years. And here is the good news right up front. The whole rescue costs almost nothing but a little time. Let me start by naming what you are actually looking at, because it is not a dead pan. That orange rust is not the pan rotting away from the inside like a rusted-out old car. It is a thin layer on the surface of solid iron that is still perfectly good underneath. Most people assume that once cast iron rusts, it is ruined and belongs straight in the trash. So they toss out a pan that would have outlived them and go buy another coated one instead. The real truth is that cast iron is one of the most forgiving materials in your whole kitchen. Rust forms for one simple reason. Bare iron met moisture and had time to just sit with it. Somewhere the thin layer of seasoning was broken, and the iron underneath was left exposed, and a little water or even damp air was all it took to start that orange bloom spreading. But rust is only iron and oxygen sitting on the surface. Scrub it off, and clean iron is right there. The pan itself has not lost a thing. It is every bit as thick and solid as the day it was cast. Think of it less like a rotted-out car and more like paint that flaked. The metal beneath is fine. Unless it is actually cracked in two or eaten through with holes, that pan is completely savable. Run your thumb over it and you are feeling surface roughness, not real damage to the metal itself. That one fact changes everything, because it means you restore this pan, you do not replace it. Before we go any further, I put together a small book of these forgotten home methods, the cheap, simple fixes that actually last, and it is linked below if you would like it. And that is the only time I will bring it up until the very end, so let us get back to the pan. Here is the part that most quick tip videos out there get completely backwards. You have probably heard the old warning that you must never ever use soap on cast iron. That rule genuinely made sense a very long time ago when dish soap was made with harsh lye. That old-fashioned lye soap really could strip the seasoning right back off the iron. But the mild dish soap sitting by your sink today is nothing at all like that old lye soap. A little modern dish soap will not hurt a well-seasoned cast iron pan in the slightest. The real enemy of cast iron was never the soap. It was always the water left sitting on it. A pan left wet in the sink, or air-dried and put away damp, is a pan that is going to rust. So set aside the fear of soap and start fearing standing water instead. That is the true cause. What most people blame for a ruined pan is not the problem. The problem is a pan left sitting wet. Now let us actually take the rust off, and there are a few gentle old ways to go about it. For light rust, the simplest tool is just a ball of steel wool and a little bit of elbow grease. Scrub the rusty spots under warm water until the orange is gone and you can see gray iron again. You are not going to hurt the pan by scrubbing it. Cast iron can take far more abuse than this. If you like, a small chainmail scrubber made for cast iron works even faster than the steel wool. For a pan that is more stubborn than that, there is an old trick with a raw potato and some salt. Cut a potato in half, dip the cut face into coarse salt, and scrub at the rust with it directly. There is a natural acid inside the potato that helps loosen the rust while the salt scours it away. For a pan that is buried in heavy rust, you can soak it briefly in a mix of plain vinegar and water. But here is the part you really must not get wrong, because vinegar is stronger than it looks. Vinegar is a mild acid, and if you leave iron sitting in it too long, it will start to pit the metal. So check the pan every 15 minutes and pull it out the moment the rust wipes away easily. Never walk off and leave a pan soaking in vinegar all day long, or you will damage the iron itself. Once the rust is gone, wash the pan with warm water and a little soap, and then dry it right away. Now we get to the part that makes this a lasting fix, and it is the step that people always rush. To protect that bare iron, we rebuild the seasoning, and it helps to know what seasoning really is. Seasoning is not a layer of old grease sitting on the pan, the way most people tend to picture it. It is oil that has been baked onto the iron until it changes into a hard, smooth, protective coating. When you heat a thin layer of oil past its smoke point, the oil does not simply dry on the surface. It goes through a real change and bonds to the iron as a tough, plastic-like layer called a polymer. That is the black, slick, natural surface that makes a good cast iron pan cook almost like non-stick. It is bonded right to the metal, not smeared on top, which is why it lasts through years of hard cooking. And here is the quiet beauty of it. Every time you cook with a little fat, you add to that layer. The pan does not wear out with use the way a coating does. It actually gets better the more you use it. A non-stick coating is at its very best on the first day, and only goes downhill from there on. A cast iron pan is at its worst on the first day, and slowly becomes the best pan you own. So here is how to rebuild that seasoning, and the whole secret is using far less oil than you think. Warm the clean, dry pan on the stove for a minute, until it is just barely warm to the touch. Pour in a small amount of a cooking oil that can take high heat and rub it over every surface. Cover the inside, the outside, and the handle, all of it, in the thinnest film of oil you can manage. Then, and this is the step that everyone gets wrong, wipe almost all of that oil back off again. It should look as though there is no oil left at all, as if you buffed the whole pan completely dry. Any oil you can actually see pooling anywhere will turn sticky and gummy instead of hard and smooth. Set your oven to a high heat and place the pan upside down on the top rack to bake it. Put a sheet of foil or a tray on the rack below to catch the few stray drops that come off. Bake it for about an hour, then turn the oven off and let the pan cool all the way down inside it. When it comes out, it will be a little darker, carrying the first real layer of new seasoning. For a pan starting from bare metal, repeat that thin oil and bake a few times to build it up properly. This is the very same reason a brand new bare pan cooks poorly until it has been seasoned a few times. Now let me be completely honest with you about what this method can and cannot actually do. This brings back a rusty, neglected pan. It cannot fix a pan that is truly cracked all the way through. If you can see a crack or a chunk has broken off, that pan is done, and no seasoning will save it. Very deep pitting, where rust has eaten actual holes into the iron, may stay a little rough forever. But even a pitted pan will usually cook just fine once the seasoning fills back in over time. A word about safety, because this method uses a hot oven and hot oil that is going to smoke a little. Open a window and turn on the fan, because baking oil past its smoke point really does make some smoke. Use thick oven mitts every single time because a cast iron handle gets just as hot as the pan does. Wipe the oil truly thin, because pooled oil can smoke heavily or even flare up in a very hot oven. And never plunge a screaming hot pan into cold water, because the sudden shock can crack the iron. None of this is difficult at all, but a hot, heavy pan does deserve a little care and full attention. Treat it with that bit of respect, and this same pan will very likely go on to outlive you. Quick question for you while we are all here together on the subject of old iron pans. Tell me down in the comments whether you have an old cast iron pan and where it first came from. Now let us talk about cost, because this is where the whole thing really stops being a close call. A decent non-stick pan costs somewhere around $30 to $60, give or take a little. And the coating on it is designed to wear down, so you replace that whole pan every few years. Over a lifetime of cooking, that is pan after pan after pan, and a small fortune spent in the end. Now, compare all of that to the cast iron pan you may already have sitting rusty in a cupboard. Rescuing it costs you a pad of steel wool, a little bit of oil, and one afternoon of your time. If you do not own one, a good cast iron pan at a yard sale often costs just a few dollars. The rustier and more unloved it looks, the cheaper it goes, and the easier it is to bring back. That same pan, once it is restored, can cook for you for the rest of your life and then keep going. One path is a new pan every few years, forever. The other is one good pan, brought back just once. And prices vary by where you live, of course, but the shape of that math does not change at all. So here is exactly what to do. Spread out so that it never becomes one big, overwhelming job. This weekend, take the rusty pan and scrub the rust off with steel wool under warm running water. Wash it, then dry it completely on the stove. Over low heat until every trace of water is gone. Then do that first thin coat of oil and the hour in the oven and let it cool down inside. If the pan was badly rusted, simply repeat the thin oil and the bake 2 or 3 more times. From then on, the daily care is almost nothing, and it is the whole reason the pan lasts so long. After you cook, clean the pan while it is still warm with water and a soft brush or a sponge. A little mild soap is perfectly fine now and then, no matter what that old rule tried to tell you. Then dry it right away and set it back on the warm burner for a minute to drive off the last water. While it is still warm, wipe the thinnest film of oil over the inside, and then it is ready to store. Never leave it wet in the sink, and never let it air dry on the rack. That is exactly how rust returns. Store it somewhere dry, and if you stack your pans, slip a paper towel between them to wick off any damp. And the more you cook with a little fat, the deeper and more non-stick that seasoning slowly becomes. Cook in it often, because for cast iron, using the pan is truly the same thing as maintaining it. Notice that almost every step here is really about keeping the pan dry, not about babying it at all. Rust needs bare iron and standing water, so a dry, oiled pan simply has nothing left to rust from. The deeper lesson here is not really about frying pans at all when you stop and think about it. It is about restoring what you already have instead of replacing it at the very first sign of wear. A non-stick pan is built to be used up and thrown away, and then quietly bought all over again. A cast iron pan is built to be brought back over and over, for as long as anyone still cares to. Restore instead of replace. Maintain with a light touch instead of tossing it and starting over. Rebuild the surface instead of coating it, and let the pan grow better in your hands over the years. Do this once, and you will have a pan that cooks better than almost anything you could buy new. And one day you may hand that same heavy pan to someone else. Still cooking, still going strong. The rust was never the end of the pan. It was only the surface quietly asking for a little attention. Bring it back once, care for it lightly, and it will very likely never need saving like this again. If this changed how you look at that rusty old pan in the cupboard, subscribe to The Forgotten Method, where every single week we bring back a practical old method that still works beautifully today. Tell me down in the comments which part of your home or kitchen has been giving you the most trouble, because it just might end up becoming the subject of the very next video on this channel, and the full collection of these forgotten household methods is waiting in the book linked below. That is the very last time I will mention it to you, exactly as I promised near the beginning. Next, on the forgotten method, we look at the old way to clean burnt, blackened glass on an oven door, without a single spray of harsh oven cleaner. Using a simple paste mixed from your own cupboard. Sometimes the method we need most is simply the one that we quietly forgot along the way.